Hello, and welcome back to the School of Self-Worth. Today, I'm seriously so excited to introduce you all to Andi Forness, my dating coach, who is a major support and guide when I dove into dating after divorce. I've known Andi for years, and this woman has coached hundreds of women into powerful, connected relationships. She knows her stuff. In this episode, Andi shares about the major mistake most women make when it comes to dating and how to turn dating from an emotional, unpredictable journey into one where you reclaim your own personal power. Our conversation was so juicy. We broke it up into two parts. Tune in today to learn why the way you've been dating might not be working. Trust me, Andi dropped some major truth bombs in this episode. If you are a high achieving career woman who wants to uncover her own roadmap to personal power, DM me power on Instagram. I've got something for you. Okay, let's get started. Well, Andi, I'm so excited to have you here on the show. Welcome to the School of Self-Worth.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here and chat with you.
Well, I had this idea actually. One of my clients had been asking me about dating, and I was like, I should really bring my dating coach onto the podcast. And she's like, yes, you should. And I got a couple of other people who were like, please bring her on. So I'm so excited that you're here to talk about it because I feel like actually, and I don't know if I ever have shared this with you, is that part of the genesis even of this podcast was for me around the self-worth journey I really experienced in dating and relationship, especially going through divorce and then dating again. And so even though we haven't dug too deeply into the podcast yet, I will be sharing more of that. I really felt like this seemed like such a great place to have this conversation. So you and I think, have so much to talk about because the format for this, everyone, will be a little different. We will talk first really about Andi's background, her experience, how she thinks about dating in relationship to worthiness and value. And then we'll get to the really juicy, how did Nicole date post-divorce, and how did Andi handhold her to get her through some of those things? Yes. So we'll be doing it in two chunks. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today, Andi. And so, this is a question I don't think I've ever asked you is, how did you even become a dating coach? Like, what could you tell us a little bit about your journey to get to that point?
Sure. So, gosh, 15 years ago, I'm just going to kind of go like that because I'm kind of losing track of numbers at this time. Maybe longer. Yeah, maybe longer. 15 to 20 years ago, I got a divorce. And I thought that it would be really easy for me to just go on out and meet someone. I'm like in a big city. I was attractive. I'm smart. I'm fun. All this kind of stuff. I thought it was just going to be simple. Like, we're going to get a divorce and sure, I'll find someone that matches me now. Right. My ex-husband and I met in college and we were a great match. But then fast forward 20 years, I kind of felt like that I had not, we weren't really a match anymore. I mean, there's more to it, but I thought it'd be really easy. And it wasn't.
Yes.
And what I recognized, maybe after like a year or two, I recognized I was doing the same stuff. Like, I was doing the same things. I was feeling the exact same way. And that's when I knew that I needed to do some like internal work, because even though I changed the person, I was feeling the exact, it was all repeating itself. And so I got into Carl Jung, Jungian coaching, and I was going to be a life coach. But what I realized, and I still was, I was like maybe like my first 6 months, but I decided to niche down and actually take the coaching process of looking at persona shadow and all the yummy stuff that people that are into like self-help are into, like, intention and manifesting and all that kind of stuff, like all of that stuff, yoga, right? All the things we learn in yoga, like little adjustments, everything. I decided to just put all of my knowledge and all my thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of personal development. How can I like put it into one area, dating?
Mm, that's really cool. So background is that Andi and I met through yoga teacher training. So we really go way back. I mean, probably
Yes.
to that era. And then we, left and went and lived our own lives for a while. And then she was sharing a lot about dating. And so this is when I started to see, and I actually came to you first really for business rather than for
Uh-huh.
dating.
Right.
But yeah, so can you share? So you decided to niche down into dating, and was it because the work you were doing was helping you start to figure out dating? Like, how did
Yeah.
you start to work through dating, both in your own life as well as supporting others with it?
Well, it was really, like I said, I think before I started doing, I guess, the online business, if you will, I thought dating was just like random. Like you
Mhm.
just randomly met somebody or you felt the vibe of somebody and it was like attraction and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't really realize until I started building a business that you actually can create, but you've got to like put some effort, right? Like you can actually create. And when I realized the similarities between building an online business and online dating, I like it just kind of chink chink to me. And so that's essentially what it was. It's really not, maybe when you're 20, and you've got like all this time and you're vibing out in the world and all this kind of stuff. But when you're like 40, and I had small kids at the time and I was trying to start a business, there was not a lot of me going out and vibing like with the world. Like I
Yeah.
was just not, like I wasn't like out in the world really. I was literally like at work or at home or on a soccer field. And so I really had to make it more intentional.
Mm. Yeah, that's so powerful because I share some of what Andi has taught me with my clients, and we always talk about it, and they're like, "You can date that way?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." And actually, I wish I had I mean, I don't know if I could have accepted it at 25 when I had,
Right.
because you're meeting more people and you're out all the time. And
Totally.
I still remember back in those days, like, I would feel frustrated because you'd go to a bar and I'm like, "But I don't know if I really wanna meet someone at a bar." And then,
Right.
like, what kind of person am I gonna meet just, like, hanging out at a bar? And no offense to anyone who's listening who may have met their partner at a bar, but
Right.
for me, I felt really challenged around that even when I was young. Yeah, and so what would you say then for you, like, understanding that intentionality and, if I always am curious because what I really learned from you before I had the language of this podcast and even the language of self-worth was actually being in a more powerful, worthy place around dating. And how did that come to fruition then for what you started to teach other people around how to date?
Yeah. Well, it was because I had to really realize that it was under the umbrella of this isn't just the random, right? Like I actually have like I feel like when we're younger, we're just like waiting for somebody to like us or waiting
Yeah.
for like the guy to pick us. Even before that, we're waiting to be picked for what was that game? Heads Up, 7 Up, or
Yeah.
we're waiting to get picked by like our parents to whatever. Like we get in class, we get waited to be picked on. And so it's like, I believe we like structure our life through that way. And so what I realized that I was just kind of defaulting. And when I first started dating, even at 40, because I hadn't really dated that much prior to getting married, that I was just defaulting to people picking me. And
Mhm.
when I realized I did that, I was kind of victimy, right? Like I had no power in it. I was like always upset or and what I realized is that I had to start choosing. And what I will say, the pushback that I always get, because my favorite platform is Bumble, and I don't know if we're going to talk about nuts or bolts, but my biggest pushback people say is, oh, but I don't want to do all the work. That's what women always say, right? Like, and
Mm.
so women that are strong and smart and possibly I'm quite analytical. I do have a lot of emotions, but I'm also really I have a very analytical side to me. And I'm an only child. I'm very vocal. I'm a teacher, so it's like all of these things made me afraid to be pushy,
Mm.
bossy. Um, I didn't want to be the alpha like in the relationship. So what I would do is I was passive and I would let all of this happen, but then I wouldn't like any of the results. And so it's just like this spiral of me being passive because I thought that because that's what I thought that I wanted that.
Right.
and that I wanted, but then I didn't like any of the results. I didn't like whatever restaurant they were going to. I didn't like who they were. I didn't like what they
Yeah.
participated in. And so that's kind of how.
Well, even when you were saying that, I think about when people love to tell women that you're air quote too much, like, don't
Yeah,
be so much because the guys aren't going to like that. Like that kind of stuff gets so trained into us when you are smart and ambitious and you have big dreams, like, don't be too much. And then now I'm like, what do you mean don't be too much? But I used to always internalize that too. It's like tamp yourself down a little bit so you get picked.
totally. Or like, I also think as women, it's one of the things that other generations have taught us. I think it's actually been like a safety thing.
Mm,
When I think about like my mom who grew up like in the 40s and the 50s, it was like, don't draw attention to yourself. Like,
right.
we need to like not. Anyways, I kind of think about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I feel like it's such a learning right for the days now where it's so much about women empowering themselves and taking that back.
Totally.
And at the same time, it's kind of crazy to me. I remember when we started to work together, which I will get into, but like how much I had internalized that being picked. Because I remember my MO used to be you basically have to kind of be in love with me for me to start dating you, which is like a pretty backward premise. Like,
Mm,
and so I only dated people who I worked with or who I was already friends with, like people who really knew me well
got
and basically were completely all in before the
it.
dating started, which now I look back at it and I laugh, but that was how I dealt with it. Like that was how I kind of protected myself to only be with guys who really were picking me and there was no potential for being rejected.
Right.
Right. And it's amazing how much, but you don't even see that stuff sometimes, I feel like. And especially if you're a smart, ambitious woman who really succeeds in your career or in other areas of your life, it can be really hard to want to look at that. And would you say that,
Totally.
like, was it divorce or dating or all of these pieces probably were starting to force you to look at it and then helped you to start help other women to do the same?
Well, I guess what it was is I had learned through my personal development coaches and leaders like how to get my power back.
Mhm.
And it was really about that. When I started, I use, and I bet we'll get into it, but I use the going out and dating as a form of personal development, especially at the beginning stages. The end goal was to find someone, but I knew that I had to do a lot of personal development in not with my journal. And I say this all the time, and this is not saying the journals are bad or meditation's bad, but a lot of people, one of the things that I used to hear was, I need to get, I need to go and, heal, or I need to go and read, meditate more or get good and get all my stuff out of my journal. And what I believe is that's one way to do it. But the most efficient way, I believe, is to do it you heal in the face of another person. And
Mm,
so when I saw like a dating app, like how do you see a dating app as a way to heal yourself from past relationships, from past trauma, whatever? How do you use those men, and I'm saying use lightly, like as a vehicle for you to actually, because this is the beauty of it. This is what you didn't do, right? Because you didn't know, but you could be a completely different person because these are complete strangers and you get to try on different behaviors
right.
and let go of some that don't serve you. And there's a beauty in it being a complete stranger like in front of you.
I mean, it's such a reframe because I remember when I started to do things I had never done before based on what we were working on, like telling someone I liked them, like on, really early. And I was like, you just do this? Like you just tell people you like them so early. And now I'm like, well, yeah, of course. Like you definitely should tell them you like them if you like them. And for me, it was like such a change in my mindset because I had never thought that. But when I think you presented it to me kind of like an experiment, it's like, oh, I'm just practicing. And it actually
Yeah,
made dating easier. I was like, I'm just practicing being
right,
powerful in dating. And that's it. And whether I
right.
like this guy or not, like I'm just going to be powerful that way. And this applies, I feel like, all relationships, right? But especially in the dating world.
Right, because the reason we are in a relationship or a dating scenario that we don't like, or we're not liking the guys that are showing up, is because we're actually down there too. Like,
Mm,
we don't have the skills to be able to have this magnificent relationship with a guy that you want, or a girl. Like, you don't have it yet, because if you did, you'd already have it. It's not this, like, you're not looking for a unicorn. But I
mm,
can just say so many times that I let quality guys that were on my level go because I wasn't attracted to them. That was my defense. I mean, I could
mm.
probably start that back in like high school. Like, I always unconsciously went for the person that it was probably not going to work out, or I would feel unfulfilled, and it would keep that whole like cycle.
Andi is dropping the truth bombs here already, but it is like that. You start to look at yourself and who you have brought in. And then that's a hard thing to look at. Because I would say this for any of you who are listening who are in that dating place, it does really start with like looking at those old relationships. And and so, okay, that's the pattern that showed up in that old relationship. How am I going to switch it up now? How
Mm-hmm.
am I going to do it differently this time around?
Yeah.
Because it's not
Like,
like
what can you
that
do?
last person was all bad, but there's the
No.
pieces that didn't work, obviously. So how can you start to look at the ones that are going to be different going forward?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation because it's like bringing me back to all the times when Andi and I were really having these conversations for me and my life. But let's actually first, before we get into it, I would love to hear more about why you like Bumble and like what your preferences are for that dating place, like what people are pushing back on you on, and like what suggestions you have for women who are like even starting to consider this and how to look at it a little differently.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons, so A, the first part is that you go out dating to either heal or to evolve your relationship skills. Like, that's the first one where I get pushback. A lot of people want to say, yeah, but it's just like chemistry, and like, I don't
Mm,
have chemistry with the person, or he's not my type. And when you look back, like, no one has been their type, right? Yeah, like their type hasn't really worked. And that's the first part, is really having to try to, you need people that are open to trying new things.
mm,
And so trying new things looks like Bumble. The reason I like Bumble is because all the women that I've coached are smart, capable, and they're also busy. And when you go to other sites, what unfortunately, and they don't have a lot of time. What happens is you get so many like emails, like it gets overwhelming, and
mm,
then women, yeah, anyways. So what I like about Bumble, it's like efficient, and it's fast, and it's this whole piece of, so this goes with yourself, you get to pick first. And I really want everyone to hear this. It's not you out there being like the, the strident, alpha male, like, going out there. You are a strong woman who gets to pick. Like, you
mhm,
get to pick. Like, anyways. Now, whether or not it matches with them, that remains to be seen. But the first part of all of it is that, like, you get to pick, you get to message first, you get to do all of it, because what I like about it for women, especially that haven't dated a long time, or they're scared, you get to manage it, and it doesn't become overwhelming.
mhm. Okay, good. Thank you. Well, she's bringing me back to these times when I started dating. So I feel like it's worth it for us to just kind of go into these flashbacks. And Andi said she doesn't remember. And I was like, I remember. I remember all of those details. Well, because one of the things she has you do is start to state how you feel, like state your preferences. And I will say I credit you, Andi, with really teaching me my preferences, because I remember when I was in the dating world, and so this is one of my old patterns, was I would just be like, whatever you want. And I would
Yes,
just
I
be
remember that.
really easygoing for whatever they wanted. So whatever my partners wanted or the people I was dating. I didn't really do it. And I did it with my friends as well. And I remember one of my very earliest assignments with you. Because you asked me if that had been happening in my previous relationship, and I said yes, definitely. Like I would always say, like, what do you want for dinner? And then whatever he wanted for dinner is like what I would make or what we would do to go out. And so you said, well, I'm sure you have preferences. And I remember thinking, I mean, I think so, but I'm fine with whatever. And you said, I'm still certain you have some preferences. And so my assignment was, I was actually going with a couple of my girlfriends on a weekend. And you said your assignment is to, start to state your preferences. And I remember that weekend I was driving with them, and they're also very strong women with like lots of perspectives and
Right.
preferences. But I remember right away we were like talking about what we were going to cook that weekend. And I was like, these are the things I want to cook. And they were like, okay. It's like, oh, you just have to say it.
Yeah. Right. And so it's like using those each bit of the dating process. I remember one woman, um, she was her only assignment was to actually feel like taken care of, meaning like the
Mm,
guy was going to, I think it was like meet her halfway. Like they were like in a big metropolitan city. He's going to meet her halfway so that like she wasn't going to have, because this is what happens, right? So you don't have a preference. You let the guy pick because you're under the whole thing that the guy needs to like lead, right? The guy, I want a guy that leads. Well, then he picks a place that's like an hour in traffic, and then you've worked all day, and then you've got to like go down there because you let him lead, and then you kind of go like in a bad mood because you've been in traffic for like an hour and you're actually not really available to date, right? Or you get mad if it doesn't go, um, you get upset because it doesn't go well or whatever. It doesn't go to a next date. And you've let all these things just kind of like happen to you where you could have taken control.
mm,
Anyways, back to this one. She did not want to date this man. He didn't even end up being in it. And I kind of knew he wasn't. But I love that he was going to meet her halfway. And I said, I just need you to go and see what that's like. Like,
mm,
go feel that experience of someone offering to meet you halfway, right? To feel, or whatever it was. And I just remember she was just like, just like, I don't want to go out. This is not the guy for me. And I'm like, I know it's not the guy for you. Actually, I said, we don't know yet. But what I
mm,
do know is he's willing to meet you halfway to make your life easier. And I want you to pay attention to that. And I really want you to feel that. And I'll go even further, ladies. I want that to be sexy. Like, we're
mhm,
not looking at like how he looks at this point. We've got to start feeling like taken care of and making someone that like honors our wants, helps us out. That's the stuff that needs to be like sexy and we need to like pay attention to.
totally. I mean, I remember so when I started dating with, working with you, Andi, I would think I was about 6 months post separation. I was not fully divorced yet.
Right.
It was like a month before COVID, but we didn't know that. And so I was like, okay, here I go. And I totally was like in that New Year energy, and I started to swipe. And
You're
I
doing
got
all the
matches and
walks.
with
All your
people.
dates were walk
They were
dates.
all walks because it was all during COVID, totally. But at the time, I remember, I don't know if you remember this guy, but I distinctly remember I had a phone call with him because this is one of the first things Andi teaches us to have a phone call with them. And I was on the phone with him, and I found him kind of boring. And she totally drilled me on that, and she's like, "Why is he boring?" I was like, "I don't know. There's just something in his voice. I just don't even really know if I wanna go on a date." And for whatever reason, this guy was going on a trip, and then when he came back, we were gonna go on the date, and I was like, "I don't know." I don't know how I feel about this. But then while he was gone, he actually sent me a photo of a whale that he had seen on the trip that he had taken. I don't know if he had been diving or what, and he sent it to me, and I told you, and you're like, "That doesn't sound very boring." I was like, "What?" Just being called on my stuff right away. I was like, "Oh," and that didn't work out,
Yeah.
but it was like a
Right.
really good lesson for me and how I was being super perfectionist. I was being very like dismissive of people because we hadn't even gone on a date. Like I had no
Right.
idea what this
Right.
guy was about, but I was already peremptory like, "Nope, not him." Even though he had done all he had messaged me back, we'd had a phone call, he'd
Right.
been very
You'd
like
given up that
active.
time. Totally.
Totally. Yeah, so I remember learning all of these things, and one of the things I learned along the way really was to start to state my preferences and
Yep.
then to also see what they did with it. And can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that? Like
Oh,
you
yes,
state your
absolutely.
preferences, and then what is it what is that drawing in and what is that showing you about the person you're talking to? Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Stay tuned for next week when Andi and I talk about what it was actually like to apply what she taught me. This gets personal, so make sure to come back next week. If you loved what you heard today, do me a favor and leave a 5-star rating and review of the show, and screenshot this episode and share it on social media, and tag me at Nicole Song. Every positive review and share out there makes such a big difference in helping to get the word out. We are so grateful for all of your support. If you're ready to unlock your own roadmap to personal power in 30 days, DM me 30 on Instagram at Nicole Song. Until next time, I'm Nicole Song, and this is the School of Self-Worth.